The first thing my mother said after I paid for our entire birthday vacation wasn't "thank you." It was, "You're not coming with us." Why had my boarding pass disappeared? Who had removed my name from a trip that I personally booked and paid for? And why did my phone show that the reservation had been changed 3 days earlier without a single notification from me? As my brother calmly picked up his upgraded boarding pass, I noticed a freshly printed itinerary with my name missing and an email titled, "Regarding your recent travel request." I had never sent any request. In that moment, I realized being left behind was only the smallest part of what my own family had planned. Before I tell you how one airport morning changed the way I looked at my family forever, I'd love to know where you're watching from and what your local time is right now. Reading your comments always reminds me how people from all over the world connect through stories like this. And if you enjoy thoughtful stories about family boundaries and finding strength without losing yourself, I'd be grateful if you subscribed so you can join me for the rest of this journey. By the time my family's flight lifted off, I was sitting alone in an airport lounge with a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. I watched the departures board change from boarding to departed, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel angry. I felt suspended, like my mind hadn't decided whether what had happened was cruel, absurd, or somehow my own fault. That last possibility lingered longer than it should have. I kept replaying my mother's face. Patricia hadn't looked embarrassed when she told me I wasn't coming. She hadn't looked guilty either. She'd spoken quietly, almost gently, as if she believed she was delivering disappointing but reasonable news. "Sweetheart," she'd said, while holding everyone's boarding passes in one hand, "this is for the best. For the best. Not 'I'm sorry.' Not 'we'll explain.' Just those 4 words. I unlocked my phone again. The email was still there. "Regarding your recent travel request." I opened it. The message thanked me for contacting the travel company regarding changes to my reservation. It confirmed that my itinerary had been updated according to my instructions. According to my instructions. Below that was a summary. Passenger removed Amber Armstrong. Remaining travelers confirmed. No refund requested. I stared at those words until they blurred together. Someone hadn't simply canceled my seat. Someone had told the travel company that I had willingly stepped away from a vacation I had spent nearly $11,000 planning. That detail hit harder than everything else. Not because of the money, because whoever had done it wanted there to be a paper trail suggesting I had chosen not to go. I took a slow breath before dialing the customer service number listed in the email. After several minutes navigating automated menus, a calm woman answered. "Thank you for calling. This is Olivia. How may I help you today?" "My name is Amber Armstrong." I gave her the reservation number. There was a pause while she searched. "I see the booking." "I need to understand something." "Of course. I never requested to be removed." Silence. Then her voice became noticeably more careful. "May I place you on a brief hold while I review the reservation history?" "Please." The music returned. I leaned back and closed my eyes. 2 months earlier, none of this had existed. The trip had started with my mother's birthday dinner. She hadn't asked for expensive gifts. She hadn't asked for jewelry. She'd smiled across the table and said almost wistfully, "Before I get much older, I'd love for all my children to take one vacation together." It sounded simple, reasonable, even sweet. Michael immediately sighed. "I wish I could afford something like that." Lauren reached over and squeezed my mother's hand. Emily looked up from filming a short video for social media and said, "A family trip would make amazing memories." Then everyone looked at me. No one said anything for several seconds. Finally, Michael laughed. "Amber probably has enough travel points to take us all." Everyone chuckled, including me. At the time, it felt harmless. I had a stable career as a senior project manager at a healthcare software company in Chicago. I traveled often for work. I had airline miles, hotel rewards, and a credit card that offered generous travel benefits. It genuinely seemed practical for me to organize everything. "I'll plan it," I'd said. Mom's eyes immediately filled with tears. "I knew I could count on you." Looking back, that sentence sounded different. Not loving, expected. Over the following weeks, planning the vacation became almost a second job. I compared flights, researched resorts, coordinated everyone's schedules, found activities my mother would enjoy without exhausting her, booked airport transfers, reserved a birthday dinner overlooking the ocean. Every decision went through our family group chat. At least that's what I believed. My mother frequently asked me to forward confirmation emails. "I want to surprise everyone with little details," she'd say. Sometimes she'd call. I accidentally deleted that confirmation. "Can you send me the hotel reservation again? What time does the airport shuttle arrive?" I never questioned it. She was the guest of honor. Of course she wanted to know the itinerary. Meanwhile, Michael rarely participated unless money came up. "Could we upgrade Mom's room? Would breakfast be included? Do they have ocean view suites?" Whenever additional costs appeared, I'd quietly cover them. Not because anyone forced me, because I wanted my mother to have a birthday she would never forget. Somehow she'd never have to reach for her wallet. Neither would anyone else. I smiled every time she thanked me. Now I wondered if those thank yous had been genuine. Olivia returned to the line. "Ms. Armstrong, I'm here. I've reviewed the reservation history, and I can confirm your reservation was modified 3 days ago." "I know. There are detailed administrative records associated with that modification." My pulse quickened. "Can you tell me what happened? I'm limited in what I can disclose over the phone before completing identity verification." "I'll verify anything you need." She guided me through several security questions: address, date of birth, payment method, billing zip code. Afterward, she spoke more carefully. "The request to remove one traveler successfully passed our verification procedures." So someone pretended to be me. I can't make that conclusion yet. "Did you speak to me?" Another pause. "I can only say the request appeared authorized." I looked out the lounge window. My family's plane was already somewhere over the Midwest. If I wasn't the one who called, I stopped myself. Olivia finished the sentence for me. "Then we need to determine how authorization was obtained." There was no accusation in her voice, only professionalism. "What happens now?" I asked. "I'd like to review the entire modification history." "Can I get a copy?" "Yes." She paused again. "It includes timestamps, internal notes, and every reservation change." I straightened in my chair. "Please send everything." "It may take an hour or two. I'll wait." Before ending the call, she added one sentence that stayed with me long after we hung up. "Ms. Armstrong, this reservation contains more activity than most family vacation bookings." I frowned. "What does that mean?" "I'm not comfortable speculating before you review the records." She hesitated. "But I do think you'll want to read every page carefully." I thanked her and ended the call. Then I opened a fresh notebook on my tablet. Instead of writing questions for my family, I started making a timeline. Dates, emails, phone calls, payments, every forwarded confirmation, every request my mother had ever made. For the first time since that morning, I stopped asking why they had done it. A different question felt far more important. How many steps had it taken to remove me from a trip I had planned from the very beginning? Less than an hour later, my inbox chimed. The sender was Olivia Martinez. The subject line read, "Reservation Modification History, Complete Administrative Record." I didn't open the attachment right away. Instead, I stared at it while my coffee sat untouched beside me. Some part of me still wanted the file to contain a simple explanation. A computer glitch. A misunderstood request. Anything that didn't require me to rethink 34 years of being a daughter. I finally tapped the attachment. 23 pages. Far more than I expected for a family vacation. The first few pages were ordinary. Booking confirmation, flight details, hotel reservations, airport transfers, the birthday dinner reservation I had made for my mother at a beachfront restaurant in Maui. Seeing my own careful planning laid out in chronological order made my chest tighten. Every confirmation email, every receipt, every reservation had my name on it. Every payment had come from my credit card. Then I reached the section labeled Reservation Activity Log. Every change had a date. Every change had a time. Every change had an employee ID. Every change had a note. I slowly scrolled. The first few entries were mine. Seat selections, meal preferences, hotel room requests. Everything looked exactly as I remembered. Then 3 weeks before departure, something changed. Customer requested additional itinerary copies, requested by Patricia Armstrong. Reason family planning. I frowned. That made sense. Mom had asked me to forward the reservation details. I kept reading. 3 days later. Customer requested confirmation documents resent. Authorized contact Patricia Armstrong. Reason coordinating birthday surprise. I remembered that phone call. Amber, I accidentally deleted the confirmation. I'd laughed. No problem, Mom. I had resent everything. Every confirmation, every reservation number, every airline record locator, every hotel confirmation, every emergency contact, everything. Another page, another request, another resend, another itinerary, another confirmation. At the time, none of it had seemed unusual. Now it looked different. Not because each request was suspicious, because there were so many of them. Someone had been collecting information. I downloaded the entire file before forwarding it to Ethan Carter. Ethan and I had met in college. While I'd gone into healthcare technology, he'd gone to law school. Today, he handled contract disputes and business litigation. He wasn't the kind of attorney who dramatized everything. If anything, he annoyed people because he refused to jump to conclusions. That was exactly why I trusted him. I texted him, "Need your opinion. Not to sue anyone. Just tell me if I'm overreacting." He replied less than 5 minutes later. "Come by after work. Bring everything." That afternoon, I barely accomplished anything at the office. Normally, I managed software implementation projects involving hospitals across several states. My job required organization documentation and careful communication. Ironically, those same habits kept taking over. Instead of crying, I made folders, emails, receipts, reservation logs, phone screenshots. I exported everything into PDFs. My coworker Megan noticed I hadn't touched my lunch. "You okay?" I forced a smile. "Family drama." She nodded sympathetically. "The worst kind." She had no idea how accurate that was. Ethan's office occupied the second floor of a renovated brick building overlooking the Chicago River. His receptionist greeted me with coffee before leading me into a conference room. Ethan walked in carrying a yellow legal pad. "You look exhausted." "I am." He didn't ask how I felt. He simply opened his laptop. "Let's start with facts." For nearly an hour, we reviewed every page together. He never interrupted. Occasionally, he'd circle a date, underline a timestamp, highlight a sentence. Finally, he leaned back. So, nothing here proves who removed you." I sighed. "I knew it." But there it was, the word I had been waiting for. "But this tells us something else." He turned the laptop toward me. "Look at the pattern." I followed his finger. 3 itinerary requests, 2 confirmation resends, 1 request for updated traveler information, another request for hotel confirmation numbers, another request for airline ticket numbers. He said quietly, "Nobody asks for this much information unless they're preparing to use it." A chill ran through me. You think they planned this? I think someone was gathering everything needed to answer security questions. He pointed toward another entry. "See this?" I nodded. "Authorized contact requested full reservation packet. It says Patricia." "It does." He looked at me. "Did she normally organize family vacations?" I laughed once. "No." "Who planned this trip?" I did. "Who paid for it?" I did. "Who had the original emails?" I did. He closed the file. "Then ask yourself why someone else suddenly needed copies of everything." I didn't answer, because I already knew. That evening, I logged into my personal cloud storage. Every important travel document automatically synchronized across my devices. I clicked on activity history. Hundreds of entries appeared. Most were routine, viewed from laptop, edited from phone, downloaded to tablet. Then I noticed something strange. Months earlier, I'd shared a folder named Mom Birthday Trip. I vaguely remembered doing it. Mom had insisted she wanted to print the itinerary. I opened the sharing history. There it was. Patricia Armstrong, access granted. Nothing surprising, except she hadn't viewed the folder once. She'd opened it 11 different times, downloaded nearly every file, some files more than once. Flight confirmations, passport information, hotel vouchers, travel insurance, even emergency contact forms. Each download had a timestamp. Each timestamp matched dates inside Olivia's reservation log. I felt my stomach drop. She hadn't needed another copy because she'd lost the first one. She kept coming back because she was collecting documents. Still, there was one thing she couldn't have done herself. The reservation history mentioned a verification phone number. It wasn't listed. I called Olivia the next morning. She recognized my voice immediately. "Ms. Armstrong, I've reviewed everything." "I assumed you might have questions." "I have one." There was a brief pause. "The security verification." "Yes." "Can you tell me which phone number completed it?" She hesitated. "I'm allowed to disclose the final 4 digits." She read them aloud. I froze. I knew those numbers. They belonged to Michael. Not approximately, not possibly, exactly. I thanked her before ending the call. For nearly a minute, I simply sat at my kitchen table. Mom had gathered the documents, but she hadn't completed the verification. Michael had. Neither of them could honestly claim this had been an accident anymore. One had supplied the information. The other had used it. I thought I had finally reached the bottom of the betrayal. Then another email from Olivia arrived. This one contained only a single sentence. "Ms. Armstrong, while reviewing the administrative notes, I found an internal comment that was accidentally omitted from yesterday's report. I believe you should see it." Attached was a screenshot from the reservation system. One line had been highlighted. Customer stated traveler voluntarily declined participation and wished remaining family members to enjoy upgraded accommodations instead. I read the sentence 3 times. Someone hadn't merely removed me. Someone had carefully written a story for the company, a story where I had smiled, stepped aside, and willingly paid for everyone else's vacation. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was replaying what had happened at the airport. I was replaying every family gathering I'd ever attended, searching for moments I had dismissed because they seemed too small to matter. A joke about me always picking up the check. My mother saying, "Amber never minds." Michael telling relatives she's the successful one. Lauren laughing, If anyone can afford it, it's Amber. Emily posting photos with captions like, "Family first," while I stood just outside the frame, usually holding everyone's coats or taking the picture. Individually, they looked harmless. Together, they painted a picture I had never wanted to see. I wasn't simply generous. I had become predictable, and predictable people are easy to use. 3 days into their vacation, my phone buzzed before I even got out of bed. Emily had uploaded another video. The thumbnail showed all 4 of them standing on a beach in Maui wearing matching tropical shirts I'd paid for as part of the birthday package. The caption read, "The best family vacation ever. So grateful we could all make this happen." Thousands of people had already liked it. Comments poured in. "Your family looks so close. What beautiful memories. Your mom looks so happy." Then I found this question I knew someone would eventually ask. "Where's Amber?" Emily replied less than 10 minutes later. "She couldn't get away from work, but she wanted us to enjoy everything anyway." I stared at that sentence. It wasn't technically accusing me of anything. It simply wasn't true. Within an hour, my phone began buzzing with messages. My cousin Rachel texted first. "I'm sorry you had to miss the trip. Work can be so demanding." An aunt from Minnesota wrote, "Your mother said you insisted everyone still go without you. That was very generous." Another relative added, "You always put everyone else first." I put my phone face down. The story was spreading exactly as someone intended. No screaming, no dramatic accusations. Just a carefully crafted version where I looked like the selfless daughter who voluntarily stayed behind. That story protected everyone else, especially my mother. Around noon, my phone rang. It was Patricia. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hi, Mom." Her voice sounded cheerful. "You wouldn't believe this weather." "I'm sure. We're about to leave for a snorkeling tour." I waited. She eventually noticed my silence. "Are you still upset?" "I'd like to understand what happened." "I already told you. No." I kept my voice calm. "You two told me I wasn't coming." Another pause. "You've always been practical, Amber." "I don't know what that means." "You have work." Michael has been under so much stress. Emily finally has opportunities with her social media. They needed this more. Needed. The word landed harder than I expected. "I paid for it." "I know. And you decided I shouldn't be there. It wasn't meant to hurt you." I closed my eyes. What exactly was it meant to do? She sighed as if I were making something simple unnecessarily complicated. Sometimes being the strongest person means making sacrifices. I didn't answer, because I finally understood something. She genuinely believed that explanation. To her, my success wasn't something to celebrate. It was justification for asking more from me. Always more. "I have to go," she said. "Everyone's waiting." Before hanging up, she added softly, "I hope by the time we get home you'll understand." The line went dead. I wasn't angry anymore. I was documenting. That afternoon, another email arrived from Olivia Martinez. Subject requested documentation attached was a PDF. Customer service interaction transcript. Not a recording, a transcript. I opened it immediately. Every line had timestamps, employee comments, customer responses. The first few exchanges covered routine identity verification. Then came the highlighted section. "Representative, can you confirm you wish to remove one traveler from this reservation, caller?" "Yes. I'm Amber Armstrong. I've decided not to travel. I'd rather my family enjoy the vacation without me." I stopped reading. Not because it hurt, because the sentence sounded completely unlike me. I would never describe myself that way. Never. I continued. "Representative, Would you like to receive any available refund? Caller, no. Please leave everything as it is. Upgrade the others if possible. Upgrade the others. Oh, I remembered Michael smiling at the airport while accepting his new boarding pass. The upgrades hadn't been random. Someone had specifically requested them. I reached the final page. At the bottom, an internal note had been added by the customer service representative after the call. Caller sounded calm and confident, no indication of fraud during verification process. I leaned back. Of course there hadn't been. Whoever had called possessed every piece of information needed to answer the security questions. The company had followed its procedures. Someone else had abused my trust. My phone rang again. Olivia. Ms. Armstrong? I've read everything. I thought you might. Her voice carried a different tone today, more cautious. I wanted to let you know we've escalated your case internally. What does that mean? Our fraud review team has opened a formal investigation. I blinked. A fraud investigation? At this stage, we're determining whether company procedures were manipulated. I don't want anyone fired. I understand. This isn't about punishing an employee. It isn't. She paused. But if someone intentionally impersonated you to obtain travel benefits, we have an obligation to investigate. That sentence settled heavily between us. This had moved beyond a family disagreement. It was now a documented case involving false identity and unauthorized account changes. What do you need from me? I asked. A written statement. I'll send it today. And one more thing. I waited. Our investigation team has requested access to the original call recording. I frowned. I thought I already had the transcript. The transcript is standard. The recording is different. Very. She chose her words carefully. A transcript tells us what was said. The recording tells us who said it. I felt my heartbeat quicken. You think the voice matters? I think voices often answer questions that paperwork cannot. That evening, I spent nearly 2 hours writing my statement. No exaggeration, no speculation, no accusations, only facts. I listed every payment I had made, every reservation confirmation, the timeline from the airport, the emails, the administrative logs, the verification phone number. When I finally attached the document and pressed send, I felt strangely lighter. For the first time since that morning at O'Hare, I wasn't trying to convince anyone of my version of events. I was simply preserving the truth. The next morning, an email from Olivia appeared before I even finished breakfast. Amber, thank you for your statement. Our investigators have now secured the original customer service recording. Before we proceed further, we'd like you to listen to it and confirm one thing in writing, whether the voice belongs to you. I clicked the download link. The audio file began buffering. My finger hovered over the play button. Whoever had taken my place on that phone call had believed they would never be questioned. In a few seconds, I was about to hear the voice of the person who had convinced a travel company that I had happily paid to be left behind. I put on my headphones before pressing play. The recording began with the usual disclaimer. This call may be recorded for quality assurance purposes. A representative greeted the caller. The caller answered. For the first few seconds, I wasn't thinking about evidence. I was thinking about recognition. Human beings know the voices of the people they've spent their lives around. Sometimes we recognize them even when they're whispering. The caller wasn't whispering. The voice had been softened almost overly polite, carefully controlled, deliberately slower than normal, but it wasn't mine, not even close. I listened to the entire conversation without stopping once. When it ended, I removed my headphones and sat in silence. I wasn't relieved. I was disappointed, because whoever had made that call had practiced. There were almost no hesitations, no obvious mistakes. Only one moment stood out. When the representative asked the caller to spell my last name, there was a brief pause before the answer. Just long enough to suggest someone was thinking, not remembering, thinking. I immediately replied to Olivia's email. The voice is not mine. I can state that under penalty of perjury if necessary. She answered less than 30 minutes later. Thank you. That confirmation allows us to continue our review. 2 days later, I met Ethan for lunch. He had already listened to the recording. What do you think? I asked. I think whoever made that call believed they only needed to sound confident. They almost succeeded. They did succeed, he corrected himself. They succeeded until you questioned it. He pulled out his notebook. The interesting part isn't the voice. What is the sequence? He drew a timeline. Reservation documents collected. Verification information obtained. Phone call completed. Seat removed. Upgrades requested. It wasn't impulsive, he said. It required planning. I looked down at the page. You're saying this happened in stages. I'm saying every step depended on the previous one. He circled the word documents. Without reservation numbers, they couldn't answer security questions. Then he circled verification. Without verification, they couldn't make changes. Finally, he circled upgrades. And nobody requests upgrades after removing a traveler unless that possibility was already being considered. I stared at the circles. They knew exactly what they wanted. I believe so. He folded the notebook closed. But remember something important. What? You don't actually need to prove which family member said which sentence? I don't. No. He leaned forward. You only need to establish that the changes were unauthorized. That distinction mattered. Until then, I'd been chasing the question of who. Ethan reminded me the investigation cared first about what. What happened, what records existed, what authorization was missing. Facts before motives. 3 days later, Olivia invited me to join a video meeting with the company's fraud review team. The meeting included Olivia and another employee named Richard, who introduced himself as Director of Customer Integrity. The title sounded intimidating. Richard spoke calmly. We appreciate your patience, Ms. Armstrong. I appreciate your help. He nodded. We've completed the first phase of our investigation. He shared his screen. A flowchart appeared. Every reservation activity had been placed in chronological order. Every login, every phone call, every payment, every modification, every email. Seeing my vacation reduced to a technical diagram felt strangely comforting. Technology had no emotions. It simply remembered. Richard highlighted one section. Your original booking remained unchanged for nearly 7 weeks. I nodded. Then, during a 48-hour period, there was an unusual concentration of activity. Boxes lit up one after another. Additional document requests, repeated itinerary downloads, verification updates, traveler removal, seat reassignment, upgrade requests, hotel room modifications, airport transfer changes. It all happened almost at once, Mar, Richard said. Exactly. He enlarged another section. Our system records the devices used to access customer accounts. I looked closer. Several entries showed my laptop. Others showed my phone. Then there were 2 devices I had never seen before. What are those separate devices used to access reservation information? I've never owned either. We know. My heartbeat accelerated. How? Because your normal login pattern is remarkably consistent. He pointed toward a graph. Work laptop, personal laptop, iPhone, always the same 3 devices. Then suddenly, unknown device A, unknown device B. Both appeared only during the 48 hours before my removal. Richard continued. Our cybersecurity team compared the activity. He clicked again. The unknown devices did not access your customer account directly. They didn't. No. They accessed shared reservation documents after those documents had been downloaded. I frowned. So they weren't hacking me. Correct. They were using files that had already been legitimately obtained. My stomach tightened. The downloads Patricia had requested, the copies I'd willingly forwarded. The information had never been stolen. I'd handed it over myself. Richard wasn't finished. There is another issue. He opened the payment history. I expected to see the original vacation cost. Instead, several additional transactions appeared. One caught my attention immediately. Premium cabin upgrade. Another. Luxury airport transfer. Another. Oceanfront suite enhancement. I looked at the amounts. They charged those to my rewards account. Yes. I never approved them. Our records show they were processed after the traveler removal. So after I was gone, the remaining travelers received upgraded services. I slowly counted. 4 premium seats, larger suite, private transportation, VIP dining package. None of those upgrades had existed in my original itinerary. Someone had decided that removing me created room in both the budget and the reservation. Not once had anyone called to ask. Richard folded his hands. Based on the evidence available today, we have concluded that unauthorized reservation modifications occurred. The sentence landed with surprising force. Not suspected, not possible, occurred. He continued, We're reversing all reward point deductions associated with those unauthorized upgrades. I nodded quietly. We'll also reimburse any charges connected to modifications you did not approve. I appreciate that. He looked directly into the camera. There's one final matter. What is it? Our internal policy requires us to determine whether customer impersonation occurred. I knew where this was going. If we conclude that someone knowingly represented themselves as you, he paused, our report will reflect that. He didn't threaten anyone. He didn't mention police. He simply explained policy, objective, documented, professional, exactly the opposite of how my family handled problems. After the meeting ended, I called Ethan. They confirmed unauthorized changes. Good. They're restoring everything. Also good. But, he laughed softly, I've known you 20 years. There's always a but. I looked out my apartment window. I don't actually care about the reimbursement anymore. I know. I care that they all stood at that airport pretending none of this had happened. He was quiet for a moment. What are you going to do? I already knew. I'm inviting everyone to dinner. To confront them? No. To ask questions. There's a difference. There is. What kind of questions? I smiled for the first time all week. The kind that people answer before they realize you already know the truth. That evening, I sent a message to our family group chat. I'd love for everyone to come over Sunday evening. I cooked your favorite dinner. We should finally talk about Hawaii. My mother replied first. That sounds wonderful. I'm glad we're putting this behind us. Michael added a thumbs up. Lauren sent a heart emoji. Emily wrote, can't wait. None of them asked why I suddenly wanted to host. None of them asked what I wanted to discuss. None of them knew that neatly organized inside a blue folder on my dining room table were the reservation logs, the call transcript, the device records the payment history, and the preliminary fraud findings. For the first time since the airport, I wasn't preparing to defend myself. I was preparing to let the evidence speak before anyone had the chance to rewrite the story again. Sunday evening arrived with perfect weather. The kind my mother always called a blessing. By 5 o'clock, my apartment smelled like roasted chicken rosemary potatoes and fresh bread. I cooked the same meal we had every year on my father's birthday before he passed away. It wasn't meant to be sentimental manipulation. It was familiar, neutral, I wanted no one to feel ambushed the moment they walked through the door. If people believed they were walking into an ordinary family dinner, they would behave naturally. Natural reactions were usually the most honest ones. At exactly 5:12 p.m., the doorbell rang. Emily arrived first carrying a small bouquet. "Oh wow," she said as she stepped inside. "You really went all out." "I like hosting." She looked around my apartment. "You've always made this place feel peaceful." I smiled politely. "Thank you." 5 minutes later, Michael and Lauren arrived together. Michael hugged me. "Told you Hawaii would have been better if you'd come." It was such an effortless sentence that I almost laughed. He truly expected me to pretend nothing had happened. Lauren handed me a bottle of wine. "We missed you." "You did?" She blinked. "Of course." Before either of us said anything else, the elevator doors opened again. My mother walked toward us, carrying the shell necklace she'd bought in Maui. She hugged me tightly. "I'm so happy we're together." I hugged her back. "So am I." Neither statement was entirely false. I was happy, not because everything had been repaired, because tonight I would finally stop guessing. Dinner began pleasantly. Emily talked about new brand partnerships. Michael complained about rising business costs. Lauren described a couple they had met at the resort. Mom showed everyone photos from her birthday dinner overlooking the ocean. She even slid her phone across the table. "You should see the sunset, Amber." I looked. It was beautiful. The same restaurant reservation I'd spent weeks arranging. The table by the water, the birthday cake, the flowers, everything exactly as I'd planned. Except I wasn't there. "I picked that table," I said quietly. Mom smiled. "You have wonderful taste." The room became quiet for a moment, then Michael reached for another dinner roll. "So," he looked at me, "you doing okay now?" "I think so." "I'm glad." He leaned back comfortably. "I hated that whole misunderstanding." I folded my napkin onto my lap. "Misunderstanding." "Yeah. What exactly was misunderstood?" Michael shrugged. "The travel thing." "I don't think I misunderstood it." Lauren spoke before he could answer. "Amber families make mistakes." "I agree." She seemed relieved. "We don't need to relive everything." I wasn't planning to. I reached for my glass of water. "I just have a few questions." Mom nodded encouragingly. "Ask anything." I started with the simplest one. "Who decided I wasn't going on the trip?" Silence. Michael looked toward Mom. Mom looked toward Lauren. Lauren smiled awkwardly. "It wasn't really one person." "So it was discussed." Another silence. Mom answered carefully. "We talked." "When?" "A few days before we left." "And everyone agreed?" Emily shifted in her chair. "I mostly stayed out of it." I looked at her. "Did you know before we drove to the airport?" She hesitated. "Yes." "How long before?" She looked down. "Maybe?" Her voice became almost a whisper. "A couple of weeks." Michael immediately interrupted. "She didn't have anything to do with the decision." "I didn't ask that." He stopped talking. I noticed Ethan had once told me something during a contract negotiation. People often answer the question they're afraid you asked instead of the one you actually asked. I let the silence continue. Eventually, Emily spoke again. "I just assumed Mom had talked to you?" "I hadn't." "I know that now." She nodded without meeting my eyes. I moved to my second question. "Who contacted the travel company?" No one answered. Lauren took a sip of wine. Michael examined his plate. Mom quietly folded her napkin. "I don't remember," she finally said. You don't remember. It was hectic. I understand. I stood. I'll be right back. No one looked worried. Not yet. I walked into my home office and returned carrying a blue folder. I placed it gently in the middle of the table. Nobody spoke. I opened it. The first document slid onto the table. Reservation activity log. I turned it toward my mother. This says someone requested multiple copies of the reservation. Mom glanced down. I probably did. You did. I nodded. It also says those requests happened 6 different times. Michael frowned. So I'm asking why. Mom answered quickly. I wanted to keep track of everything. I'd already organized everything. I know. Then why 6 requests? She didn't answer. I placed down another page. The verification summary. This lists the phone number used during the authorization process. Michael's expression changed almost imperceptibly. Only for a second. But I saw it. I slid the page toward him. The last 4 digits belong to your phone. He looked at the paper. I don't know anything about that. You don't? No. Are you saying the travel company fabricated the record? I didn't say that. What are you saying? He rubbed the back of his neck. I might have answered a verification call for Mom. There wasn't a verification call for Mom. I kept my tone even. It was for me. Lauren jumped in immediately. Amber, this feels like an interrogation. I looked at her. It only feels that way if someone doesn't want to answer. The room fell silent again. Mom finally spoke. We never meant to hurt you. I believe you. Everyone looked surprised. I really do. I continued calmly. I don't think any of you woke up wanting to ruin my life. Mom's shoulders relaxed slightly. I looked around the table. You convinced yourselves this wasn't a big deal. No one argued, because it was true. To them, removing me wasn't theft. It wasn't betrayal. It was redistribution, taking from the one who always had enough, giving to the ones who supposedly needed more. I reached into the folder again. This time I removed the transcript. Not the whole thing, just 1 page. I placed it in front of my mother. This is the customer service transcript. Lauren's eyes widened. Michael immediately leaned forward. Emily stopped eating altogether. Mom read only the highlighted paragraph before looking up. What is this? The conversation where someone claimed to be me. Nobody moved. The caller told the company I voluntarily stayed home. Michael spoke first. Maybe that's what they believed. I turned toward him. The employee believed it because someone said it. He had no answer. I looked back at my mother. Did you tell them I didn't want to go? She looked genuinely distressed. Then she stopped. Not because she didn't know the answer, because she knew the truth no longer fit the story they'd all been repeating. Emily quietly pushed her plate away. I should tell you something. Everyone turned toward her. She swallowed. I knew Amber wasn't coming before we left. Mom closed her eyes. Michael whispered, Emily. She ignored him. I already had content planned. What kind of content? I asked. My sponsorship schedule. She looked ashamed. I had arranged family photo shoots. When? A week before the trip. So you knew there would only be 4 of you. She nodded slowly. I thought Mom had explained everything. No one spoke. Emily looked close to tears. I didn't realize. She stopped herself. You didn't realize that you were finding out at the airport. The silence that followed was heavier than anything said all evening. Mom finally placed both hands flat on the table. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Amber. I met her eyes. She looked older than she had a week earlier, not because of the vacation, because the story she'd carefully maintained for years was beginning to collapse under the weight of simple facts. She inhaled slowly before speaking. "You still don't understand why I did it." I closed the blue folder. "No," I said quietly. "I don't. And I think it's finally time you told me." My mother didn't answer immediately. She kept both hands resting on the dining table, her eyes fixed on the wood grain instead of on me. No one spoke. For the first time that evening, there wasn't anyone trying to smooth things over. No one reached for another explanation. No one called it a misunderstanding. The room had finally become too honest for that. Patricia looked up. "I don't think this conversation should happen in front of everyone." Michael immediately nodded. "That's probably best." I looked at my mother. "I agree." Then I turned to the others. "Thank you for coming." It wasn't a request. Within a few minutes, Emily quietly hugged me before leaving. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know." She hesitated. "I should have asked questions." "You should have." She nodded once and walked away. Lauren barely looked at me as she followed Michael toward the elevator. Michael stopped before stepping inside. "I hope you remember we're still family." I met his eyes. "I'll always remember we're family." He seemed relieved by that answer. He shouldn't have been. Remembering wasn't the same as returning to the way things had been. An hour later, my apartment was quiet again. Only my mother remained. She wrapped both hands around a mug of tea I'd made for her. Neither of us drank it. Finally, she sighed. "I suppose I owe you the truth. I'd appreciate that." She looked around my apartment. It was the first time she'd really noticed it. The bookshelves, the framed photos from business conferences, the piano in the corner, the half-finished watercolor painting leaning against the wall. "You've built a beautiful life. I've worked hard for it." "I know." Another silence settled between us. Then she asked something I hadn't expected. "Do you remember when your father lost his job?" I nodded. I had been 14. Michael was already in college. Emily was still in elementary school. Money became tight almost overnight. Dad eventually found work again, but those 2 years had changed all of us. Mom continued. "You never asked for anything." I remembered. I had stopped asking for new clothes. I borrowed library books instead of buying them. I found part-time jobs as soon as I was old enough. I even paid for most of my college textbooks with money I'd earned tutoring high school students. I thought I was helping. "You were." She smiled sadly. "You always helped." She looked down into her untouched tea. "And after a while," she stopped. "I began expecting it." Those words hurt more than denial would have, because they sounded honest. "I didn't wake up one morning deciding to use you." "I believe you." "It happened little by little." She spoke slowly, almost as if she were discovering the pattern herself. "When Michael struggled, I thought," she shrugged helplessly, "Amber will understand." When Emily couldn't afford something, another shrug, "Amber doesn't need as much." When birthdays came, you assumed I'd pay. Yes. When vacations came, yes. When emergencies came, yes. Every answer was barely louder than a whisper. Not defensive, simply factual. I leaned back. "So when you wanted a birthday trip?" She closed her eyes. "I knew you'd make it happen." "You never asked if I wanted to." "No." "You expected me to." "Yes." There was something strangely freeing about hearing her admit it. Not because it erased the hurt, because it finally gave the hurt a shape. "What changed?" I asked. She looked confused. "What do you mean, you invited me? You let me plan everything." You watched me pay for all of it. So why remove me? Tears filled her eyes. You were never supposed to find out that way. I almost laughed. That way. She nodded. I planned to tell you after we came home. I stared at her. You planned to tell me after spending my money on a vacation I wasn't allowed to take. She winced. When you say it like that, how else should I say it? She didn't answer. Instead, she opened her purse. I brought something. She removed several folded sheets of paper. I almost threw these away. I unfolded them. Printed emails, years old. The sender was my mother. The recipient was Lauren. One subject line immediately caught my eye. About Amber, I looked up. Why are you giving me these? Because I think you deserve to know who I became. I began reading. The first email had been sent nearly 5 years earlier. Lauren had asked whether everyone should split the cost of a family reunion rental. Mom replied, "Don't worry about Amber. She's the one who never needs anything. She'll probably cover whatever's left." I turned to the next email. This one discussed Christmas gifts. Amber always says she doesn't want much. Let's focus on Michael and Emily this year. Another, family barbecue expenses. Amber has a better salary than all of us combined. She won't mind. Then another, a hotel reservation for my cousin's wedding. If we're short, Amber will handle it. She always does. I lowered the papers. None of the emails were cruel. None contained insults. None said she loved me less. That almost made them worse, because they revealed something quieter. Over years, my mother had stopped seeing me as someone with limits. She had begun seeing me as a solution. Whenever a problem appeared, the answer had become the same. Amber, I wasn't trying to punish you, she said softly. I know. I thought... She searched for the words. I thought your success meant these things mattered less to you. They mattered. I know that now. No. I shook my head. You know because I finally stopped saying yes. She covered her face with one hand. I wish I'd realized sooner. So do I. Another long silence followed. Then she surprised me. There's something else. She reached into her purse again. This time, she handed me an old accordion folder. I found this while cleaning my filing cabinet after we got back. The folder was labeled in my father's handwriting. Family expenses. I've never looked inside, she admitted. I think you should. After she left later that evening, I sat alone on my living room floor with the folder beside me. It wasn't thick, maybe 20 or 30 documents, mostly receipts, canceled checks, old insurance papers. Nothing immediately alarming, until one envelope slipped loose. Across the front in my father's handwriting were 6 words. Amounts. Amounts Amber insisted were gifts. I frowned. Inside was a handwritten ledger. Page after page, dates, amounts, descriptions, college tuition loan, Michael's business equipment, Emily's first apartment deposit, Mom's kitchen renovation, family reunion expenses, holiday travel, medical bills. Every time I had quietly stepped in over the past decade, my father had written it down. Not because he expected repayment, because beside nearly every entry he'd written the same sentence. She deserves to be paid back someday. My throat tightened. The final page contained one last note, written only 3 months before he died. If I'm not here, I hope someone remembers everything Amber has done for this family. I closed the folder and wiped my eyes. For years, I'd believed no one had noticed. I had been wrong. Someone had. And judging by the organized records my father had left behind, I had a feeling this old folder contained far more than memories. I left my father's folder untouched until the next morning. Not because I wasn't curious, because I knew the difference between looking for answers and looking for ammunition. I had no interest in turning decades of family history into a courtroom exhibit. If I opened those papers, I wanted to understand the pattern, not punish the people inside it. I made coffee, carried the accordion folder to my dining table, and opened it again. This time I examined every page carefully. Dad had been meticulous. Each entry listed the date, the reason for the expense, the amount, and whether anyone had offered to repay me. In the final column, he had developed his own shorthand. Or offered repayment. DR declined repayment. NR no repayment discussed. Most of my entries were marked NR. No one had even talked about paying me back. Not because they couldn't. Because everyone, including me, had quietly accepted that my contribution was simply expected. I wasn't reading evidence of criminal behavior. I was reading evidence of a family culture. And I had participated in it for years. By lunchtime, I had spread my own financial records beside Dad's notes. Bank statements, credit card summaries, travel rewards history, digital receipts. I wasn't trying to match every dollar, only the larger expenses. To my surprise, Dad's handwritten ledger was remarkably accurate. There was the $3,800 I'd contributed toward Michael's first inventory order after he opened his business. The $100 security deposit for Emily's first apartment when she moved to Chicago, the unexpected plumbing repair at Mom's house, holiday rentals, weekend family trips, emergency flights, wedding gifts, hospital parking passes after my aunt's surgery. Individually, none of them bothered me. If someone I loved genuinely needed help, I would probably make the same decision again. What unsettled me was something else. The help had never flowed in the opposite direction, not once. I opened a spreadsheet and began organizing everything by category: housing, travel, medical, family events, business assistance. Then I added one final column. Requested or assumed that was the question I wished I had asked years earlier. Some expenses had been requested openly. Amber, could you help? Others had simply appeared. Restaurant checks slid toward me. Vacation deposits quietly left unpaid. Family members looking in my direction whenever money became uncomfortable. Nobody ever announced that I was responsible. Responsibility simply drifted toward me until I accepted it. I stared at the completed spreadsheet. The total wasn't what caught my attention. The pattern did. Helping had slowly become obligation. Generosity had slowly become expectation, and expectation had eventually become entitlement. That afternoon, Olivia called. "Good afternoon, Ms. Armstrong." "Hi, Olivia. I wanted to update you personally." "I appreciate that." "Our fraud review has been completed." I sat a little straighter. "And we determined that unauthorized modifications were made to your reservation." She spoke with the same careful professionalism she had shown from the beginning. "The reward points used for the premium upgrades have been fully restored to your account." "Thank you." "Any fees associated with those unauthorized changes have also been reversed." I opened my airline account while we were talking, my balance refreshed. The missing reward points had returned. Every one of them. It wasn't just the points. The unauthorized airport transfer charges were gone. The upgraded dining package had been removed. The additional hotel enhancement no longer appeared. Financially, the matter had been corrected. Emotionally, it was something else entirely. Olivia continued. "I also wanted you to know we've updated your customer profile." "In what way?" "Your account now requires additional identity verification before reservation changes can be processed." I smiled faintly. "So this can't happen again." "That's the goal." She paused before adding, "Sometimes difficult cases lead us to improve our procedures." I'm glad if something good came from it. "So are we." Before ending the call, she said something that stayed with me. I've worked in customer relations for almost 15 years. That must be interesting. It is. I've learned something. What? Most fraud cases are about strangers. She hesitated. The hardest ones are about trust. After we hung up, I realized she wasn't talking only about travel reservations. That evening, Ethan stopped by with takeout from our favorite Thai restaurant. I showed him the spreadsheet. He studied it for several minutes. This is impressive. It doesn't feel impressive. It feels sad. He nodded. It can be both. I pushed the laptop toward him. I almost kept going. What do you mean? I almost calculated every dollar with interest. And I stopped. Why? Because that's not actually what I want. He smiled. What do you want? I thought about it for a long moment. I want to stop wondering whether saying no makes me a bad daughter. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pointed toward one line on the spreadsheet. At the very bottom, I'd accidentally left a blank row. He tapped it with his finger. Add one more category. What category? He smiled. Future. I looked at him confused. He continued. Don't just track what happened. Decide what happens next. That night, I opened a new document. Instead of listing old expenses, I wrote a simple title. Family Financial Boundaries. The document wasn't legal. It wasn't meant for anyone else. It was for me. I wrote, I will never again pay for a family event unless expectations are discussed in writing beforehand. Shared expenses will be divided before reservations are made. Access to my account's confirmations, passwords, or verification information will remain private. Helping someone is a choice, not an obligation. I read the list twice. For the first time in weeks, I felt something that wasn't anger. Relief. Not because my family had changed, because I finally had. The next afternoon, my phone vibrated. It was a text from my mother. There was no explanation, no attempt to defend herself, no discussion about the investigation, just one sentence. Can we meet? Just the two of us. I don't want to hide behind the rest of the family anymore. I looked at the message for a long time before setting the phone down. For weeks, every conversation had been about documents, logs, receipts, emails, verification records. Now there were no more files to collect, no more timelines to build. Only one conversation remained. And for the first time in my life, I knew I could walk into it without needing my mother's approval or her apology to protect my own peace. I didn't answer my mother's text until the following morning, not because I wanted to punish her, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't responding out of guilt. I was responding because I had decided I was ready. There was a difference. I suggested we meet at the Chicago Botanic Garden the following Saturday. It had always been one of my favorite places. When I was little, my father used to bring me there every spring. He said gardens reminded him that healthy things needed patience, not force. After he died, I visited only a handful of times. It felt right to return there now. When I arrived, my mother was already sitting on a bench overlooking a small pond. She wasn't dressed the way she normally was for family gatherings. No jewelry, no carefully styled hair, no bright lipstick. Just jeans, a light sweater, and a paper cup of coffee. For the first time in years, she looked less like the woman trying to hold a family together and more like someone who had run out of ways to pretend everything was fine. She stood when she saw me. I wasn't sure you'd come. I wasn't sure either. We walked without speaking for several minutes. The gardens were quiet. Children chased ducks near the water. A retired couple admired late summer flowers. Life continued around us as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Eventually, Mom stopped walking. I've apologized 100 different ways in my head. You haven't actually apologized, she nodded. I know. She looked directly at me. I'm sorry, Amber. No explanation followed. No but. No mention of Michael. No mention of Emily. Just 4 words. I'm sorry, Amber. I waited. She continued. I betrayed your trust. Yes. I embarrassed you. Yes. I let everyone believe something about you that wasn't true. Yes. She took a shaky breath. And I expected you to forgive me because you always have. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I asked the question that had been sitting quietly in the back of my mind ever since Hawaii. When did you decide I wasn't coming? She answered immediately. About 10 days before the trip. Earlier than I'd hoped, later than I'd feared. Who was there? She looked away toward the pond. Michael and Lauren. I nodded. And Emily. She wasn't part of the decision. But she found out. Yes. When? A few days later. I remembered Emily admitting she'd planned social media content before the trip even began. The pieces fit together. Mom looked ashamed. I told them I would explain everything to you. You never did. I know. Why? She laughed softly, though there wasn't any humor in it. Because every day I waited, it became harder. So you chose the airport. I convinced myself there wouldn't be a scene. I looked at her. There wasn't. No. You counted on me staying calm. A tear rolled down her cheek. I did. She wasn't denying it anymore. She had known exactly which daughter she was dealing with. The daughter who wouldn't scream in public. The daughter who wouldn't ruin her mother's birthday. The daughter who had protected the family's image her entire life. I suddenly understood something. Even my silence at the airport had been part of their plan. We continued walking. After a while, Mom spoke again. Michael called me the night before. I looked over. He said if you came, the trip would feel awkward. Awkward? He worried there would be tension. I almost smiled. There wasn't any tension until you removed me. I know. He also said, she hesitated, that since you paid for everything anyway, it didn't really matter whether you were physically there. I stopped walking. She stopped too. I told him that wasn't fair. But you agreed. I did. Why? Her shoulders slumped. Because I'd spent years believing the same thing. She wasn't saying Michael manipulated her. She was admitting he had echoed something she already believed. That my generosity belonged to the family more than it belonged to me. We found another bench beneath a large oak tree. Mom reached into her purse. I brought something. For a split second, I thought she was about to hand me another folder. Instead, she gave me a folded piece of stationery. It wasn't new. It was one of my father's old notepads. I found this inside his desk after you showed me the ledger. I unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was unmistakably Dad's. It wasn't addressed to anyone, more like thoughts he'd written for himself. One paragraph had been underlined. The strongest person in a family usually receives the least protection because everyone assumes strength doesn't need kindness. That's how good people slowly become invisible. My throat tightened. I'd never seen this before. Neither had I. Mom wiped another tear from her face. I read it 3 nights ago. She looked at me, and I realized he'd been trying to warn me. Neither of us spoke for a long time. The breeze carried the scent of flowers across the path. Finally, she said quietly, I don't expect things to go back to normal. They won't. I know. I also don't want you to cut everyone out of your life because of me. I appreciated that she hadn't said because of this. She knew it wasn't just one vacation. It was years of choices. I don't plan to disappear. She looked hopeful. But things are going to change. I understand. I won't pay for family trips anymore. She nodded. I won't combine finances. Another nod. If someone asks for money, I'll think about it the same way I'd think about any other financial decision. I think that's fair. And if I say no? She finished the sentence herself. You don't want anyone making you feel guilty. Exactly. She closed her eyes briefly. I wish you'd learned that lesson without paying such a painful price. So do I. As we walked back toward the parking lot, my phone vibrated. An email notification. From the travel company. I opened it. Fraud review case closed. The message confirmed that all reimbursements had been completed. My reward points had been restored. Every unauthorized charge had been reversed. The investigation was officially finished. I looked at the screen for several seconds before locking my phone again. Mom noticed. Is everything resolved? The travel company says yes. And you? I smiled gently. I'm getting there. She nodded, accepting the answer. Before we reached our cars, she hugged me. This hug felt different from every other one she'd given me over the years, not because it erased the past, because it wasn't asking me to carry it anymore. As I drove home, I realized something unexpected. The fraud case had officially ended. The airport humiliation was behind me. The evidence had done its job. Now came the part no investigation could complete for me. Learning how to build a future where love no longer required unlimited access to my time, my money, or my peace. 6 months later, I found myself back at O'Hare International Airport. This time I was traveling alone. Not because I had no one to travel with, because I wanted to. My destination was Seattle for a long weekend of hiking bookstores and absolutely no itinerary except the one I had created for myself. As I waited to board, I noticed something that made me smile. No one had my confirmation emails. No one knew my account passwords. No one had access to my reward points. No one expected me to pay for anyone else's vacation. It wasn't loneliness. It was peace. 6 months earlier, that realization would have felt sad. Now it felt like freedom. Life hadn't become perfect after everything that happened. Family relationships rarely healed in straight lines. Some weeks were easier than others. Michael and I spoke only occasionally, mostly birthdays, major holidays, the occasional text asking how work was going. The biggest difference wasn't how often we talked. It was what never appeared in our conversations anymore. Money. He had asked once. About 2 months after our dinner. His business had lost an important client, and he called hoping I could help him get through one rough month. The old version of me would have transferred the money before the conversation ended. The new version asked a simple question. What repayment plan do you have in mind? Silence. Then an awkward laugh. I wasn't really thinking about repayment. I know. Another silence. I can't help this time. He sounded disappointed, but not angry. He simply said, I understand. Whether he truly did or not, I couldn't say. What mattered was that I had answered honestly without apologizing for protecting my own finances. He never asked again. Lauren remained polite whenever we saw each other. She no longer called me first whenever the family planned an event. She no longer assumed I'd organize vacations, or reserve hotels, or book restaurants. At first, family gatherings became slightly awkward. People hesitated whenever the check arrived. For years, it had naturally drifted toward me. Now it stayed in the center of the table until everyone reached for their own wallet. The first time it happened, no one said a word. The second time, it felt almost normal. By Thanksgiving, everyone automatically split the bill. I don't know whether they had changed, or whether my boundaries forced everyone else to adjust. Perhaps both. Emily surprised me the most. One afternoon, she asked if we could meet for coffee. I owe you another apology, she said before either of us ordered. You already apologized. I know. But I don't think I understood what I was apologizing for. She stirred her coffee absent-mindedly. I kept thinking the problem was Hawaii. It wasn't. I know that now. She looked embarrassed. I built content around this perfect family image because I thought that was what people wanted. And now? She smiled sheepishly. Now I think honesty lasts longer than perfection. A month later, she uploaded a video unlike anything she'd posted before. There were no luxury vacations, no carefully staged smiles, no matching outfits. Just Emily sitting in her apartment talking about boundaries, accountability, and how families sometimes confuse love with access. She never mentioned my name. She didn't need to. The comments beneath that video were different from her usual audience. People shared their own stories, some heartbreaking, some hopeful. She called me afterward. I think I finally made something real. I think you did. My mother changed more slowly. Trust always does. She still invited everyone to Sunday dinners. She still remembered birthdays. She still tried to keep the family connected. But she stopped volunteering me. If someone suggested an expensive trip, she no longer looked in my direction. Instead, she asked, "How should we divide the cost?" The first time she said those words, I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was such a small sentence, yet it represented years of learning. Sometimes healing sounds ordinary. The travel company kept one final promise. A month after closing the investigation, Olivia sent me a handwritten card. It wasn't required. It wasn't corporate. It simply read, "Thank you for helping us improve our procedures. I hope your future travels are filled with better memories." I placed the card inside my desk drawer beside my father's handwritten ledger. One reminded me how easily trust could be misused. The other reminded me that someone had quietly seen my generosity all along. Together, they balanced each other. On my 35th birthday, I didn't organize a family vacation. I rented a private room at my favorite neighborhood restaurant. There were only 11 people there. Ethan, Megan from work, several longtime friends, Emily, my mother. No elaborate speeches, no expensive gifts. Everyone paid for their own meals. When dessert arrived, Mom raised her glass. "I'd like to say something." The table grew quiet. She looked at me. For a long time, I measured love by how much one person was willing to sacrifice. She took a slow breath. I was wrong. No one interrupted. "You taught me that generosity loses its meaning when people stop treating it as a gift." Her eyes filled with tears. "I'm proud of the woman you've become." I smiled. "So am I." Those 3 words surprised both of us. Years earlier, I might have said them to reassure her. This time I said them because they were true. I was proud of myself. Not because I had won an argument, not because the travel company had restored my reward points, not because documents proved I had been right. I was proud because I had learned to separate kindness from obligation. I had learned that boundaries weren't walls. They were doors. Doors that allowed healthy relationships to enter while keeping entitlement outside. Every once in a while, people ask me whether I regret paying for that birthday trip. The honest answer surprises them. No. I regret believing that love had to be earned by being endlessly useful. The vacation wasn't the most expensive thing I lost. That illusion was, and once it disappeared, something far more valuable took its place. Self-respect. Looking back now, I don't think my family lost me at the airport. They lost unlimited access to someone who had finally realized her generosity was never supposed to come without limits. That morning at O'Hare wasn't the end of my family. It was the beginning of healthier relationships where love no longer came with an unspoken invoice addressed only to me. For years, I believed being the dependable person in the family meant saying yes whenever someone needed me. I confuse generosity with responsibility and responsibility with love. It took one painful morning at an airport for me to understand that those are not the same thing. If you've ever been the person everyone relied on, you may recognize how difficult it is to set boundaries. Sometimes the people who love us become so accustomed to our kindness that they stop seeing it as a gift and begin treating it as an expectation. That doesn't always come from cruelty. Sometimes it comes from habits that were never questioned. But understanding why someone hurt you doesn't mean you have to continue accepting the hurt. Forgiveness and reconciliation are not identical. You can forgive someone without giving them unlimited access to your finances, your time, or your emotional well-being. Healthy boundaries are not acts of revenge. They are acts of self-respect. The strongest relationships are not built on sacrifice alone. They're built on mutual respect, honesty, and shared responsibility. If this story reminded you of something you've experienced, I'd genuinely love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to set a boundary with someone you loved? What did you learn from it? Share your experience in the comments because your story may help someone else feel less alone. And if you enjoy thoughtful stories about family resilience and personal growth, I'd be grateful if you subscribed and joined us for more journeys like this. This is a fictional story created for entertainment, education, and reflection.